let's talk about your new book. You were talking about your father, and fatherhood is such a timely topic right now. We've got a new Kendrick Brothers movie documentary coming out about fatherhood. People are talking about it. So why did you decide to write a book about your father at this time?
Well, I knew that I'd write a book about my dad a long time ago, especially when he just continued to be consistent his whole life of just being the kindest man that I'd ever known, who happened to be my dad. Um, he was just extraordinary. And I think I really, honestly, I wrote the book because I believe my dad taught me what God is like
Mhm.
on a lot of levels. And because he was for me my whole life, he loved me well. You know, he had so many attributes of God, and his glass was always half full. He was upbeat. He smiled and laughed every day. And he fed the homeless, and he loved my mom well. And I know he had his problems, but I just didn't see very many of them. So when he got dementia in 2011, I knew that I needed to start to kind of recollect and start thinking about, all these amazing stories about me and my dad. And then he went to heaven in November 15. I grieved for a while, and I grieved a little bit. And I thought, I don't know if I can write this book yet. And then 2020 came along, and I thought, hey, what a great year to write a book. And I kind of got inspired, and I kind of got my head into it. And I started to remember all these crazy stories that I'd forgotten about my dad. And baseball was a big thread with us, just because he was a great ball player, and I was a pretty good ball player because of him. But yeah, it was, I'm really happy with the book. I'm just so glad I finally got to write it, because he was extraordinary on so many levels.
Well, and you share so many incredible stories about your dad. And my dad is one of my very favorite people. So, it's just such a sweet thing to read about how you remember your dad. So, what was your favorite story that you shared in the book?
Oh my word, there's too many. I think the one that I vividly remember every aspect of it, was when he had fallen, and we thought he was going to die, and I was so glad I wasn't on the other side of the world. I was at my studio. My mom called, a little bit frantic, and said, "Your dad's fallen. I think we're going to lose him." And long story short, I get over to the house. There's emergency vehicles everywhere. There's 5, 6 paramedics working on my dad, and he looks awful. He's white as a ghost, and I'm crying. My mom's crying. Another long story short, they get him out to the ambulance, and they're working on him in the back of the ambulance. And what he did about 5, 10 minutes later is what I really remember. He would have all, let me back up and say, he would have all these sayings like, what in the wide world of sports is going on, which he'd see something crazy on TV. Or if he wanted to say something, he would say, hold the phone, like hold the phone. That was a big thing of his. But whatever, they're working on my dad. I'm not leaving. And all of a sudden, all these people were out talking to my mom, praying with my mom. And I'd walk away because I'm seeing the color coming back into my dad's skin. I think, oh my gosh, he's going to be okay. And I don't get 5 steps away, and I hear my dad go, hold the phone. And it was like, hold the phone, hold the phone, hold the phone. He's shouting. It's like, oh my gosh, what? And I run back to that. It's a big vehicle, big emergency vehicle. And literally every paramedic is like, they're frozen. Like, and my dad lifts his head off that stretcher and said, "Do y'all know who that is out there? That's my son,
Mm.
Michael W. Smith." He's so proud of me. He just thought I hung the moon. But when he said that, I thought, oh, Dad, gosh, you're at it again. That's just hilarious. And then it was like 10 seconds later, it was like an epiphany to me. And I heard the voice of God say, "That's how I feel about you.
Mm.
That's how I feel about you." And it took my breath away. My knees buckled. I think I actually had to hang on to something. It just was an epiphany, a moment in time for me. That's the story. And believe me, there are tons of baseball stories in there too. But that one I have told many a night in concert at the end of the night, telling that story about my dad and equating that with the love of God.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's so neat that you're able to relate to God as the perfect father because of your experience with your earthly father.
Yes. And I think that's why I wrote the book, and because I think a lot of people still struggle with, this whole thing being friends with God, and this, they can't quite grasp that he actually sings over you and he dances over you. I mean, and all these promises of God, how he wants to just father you. I mean, and I think that's a lot of that's been from a lack of not really portraying God who he really is in churches in America and around the world. You get all these crazy theologies, and
Mhm.
he's going to punish you. He's going to, he's upset with you, and you get people who didn't have good fathers, and you start talking about a father, this great, amazing heavenly father. Well, they don't want to have anything to do with a father because of their experience with their own father. So it's a tricky thing to kind of get this thing to be able to portray the truth, and you finally see people get it, and it's like the light bulb goes off, and it's a game changer, because you'll never be able to walk into your full destiny until you know that you're loved.
How do we find a happy medium? How do we find all these parts of God? How do we present him accurately to this world?
I think you have to go just back to the promises of God. I think you have to go look at those, um, which I think are the most important thing. Uh, he does discipline those he loves. Hey, I discipline my kids. Are you just going to let them do whatever they want to do? There's got to be some, at some point, I mean, he's so patient. I mean, God, I can't believe how patient he is with us.
Mhm.
But, at some point, stuff's going to happen, and it doesn't have anything to do with how much he loves us. I mean, if you're just going to continue to turn your back on God and just do the unthinkable, and watching man's inhumanity to man, and the sex trafficking and the abuse, and the list goes on. I mean, you just go, at some point, I just think it's going to hit the fan. I mean, read the book. It tells you what's going to happen. It's there. But but I think when you understand the Father heart of God, and knowing how much he loves you, what do? You just respond to it.
Mhm.
And when you respond to it, you walk in obedience, and you want to do the right thing. You don't want to go out and give in to your lustly whatever, this thing that wants to drive you, this earthly vessel. You don't want to do those things. You just want to please God. You just go, oh God, what can I do to further your kingdom, because what you've done for me. So you just want to love him back. So and when you see travesty, and you see people doing crazy things, they don't know the Father, but they can know the Father. I know that. I've seen evil like you've never seen it, and seen those people turn their hearts to Jesus. So there's hope for everybody.
You mentioned earlier too that people's view of God is related to how they view their earthly father. So what do you want people who maybe grew up in an abusive home, where their father was angry or mean or just abused them in some way, or they didn't have a father, what do you want them to take away from your book?
Well, I think the one thing is, I hope they'll, obviously, I've had a good father figure, and to kind of picture the way my dad fathered me, and that would equate with the heart of God, and that they would find maybe throughout the book going, you know what, I need to forgive my dad. Um, there's a beautiful part in the book about my mom. Uh, my mom was 8 years old, and her three younger siblings, they were abandoned by my real grandmother. They were on their way home from school or something. They were one block from their house. My mom, 8, Aunt Pat, D, Bill, 654. She told them to get out of the car, and you're walking the final block home. Don't know why. She's wasn't a good mom. She drove off, and she never came back, ever, ever. And my mom could have been a mess her whole life, and she just somehow just let God mother her. And I don't talk about this in the book, but what's extraordinary about my mom, just like my dad, my Aunt Pat died of cancer, and my mom went to the funeral, and so did I, and I was 20 years old. and my real grandmother was there.
Oh, wow.
And I had to bite my lip because I wanted to unleash on her of what you did to my mom. But I just bit my lip. I tried to just look the other way, but I saw out of the corner of my eye my mom loving on her mom.
Mm.
And I'll never forget that. And then she tells me, I didn't know this till like 10 years ago. She told me, because we started talking about a real mom. And she said, yeah, I don't know if I told you this, but my mom called me 3 years after that funeral and asked if I would forgive her. And my mom said, I forgave you a long time ago.
Mm.
So the power of forgiveness
Mhm.
is freeing. Being bitter and holding a grudge is a life killer. It just, you get sick, you're miserable. So maybe this book will spark something where people have been abused and have not had good father figures or mother figures, that they can just find a way going, you know what, I just need to forgive my mom and dad. And that's freedom right there. That is freedom.
That's incredible. It's just funny you're saying all this, and I'm like, we're coming out of a pandemic when people were sort of forced to be together. And I think it
Yeah.
unearthed a lot of issues that maybe busyness covered up before that were beneath the surface. So I think this message of forgiving people in your family and your parents is so timely. Did you have any idea how timely it was going to be?
No, I didn't. I just knew that 2020 was a good year to really dive in and do it. We all didn't know we'd be isolated this long. So yeah, and there's this generation, we've never been through anything like this. So what's it do to the psyche? What's it do to when you're used to being with people and we're meant for community? Um, and then everything sort of falls apart, and what we know is normal is kind of gone out the window. And what you hope for in a crisis like this is that people, which usually happens, is that people start to look elsewhere, going, you know what, maybe there really is a God. Um, during tragedy, I remember during 9/11, there was this whole thing of people going, they start seeking out God, and so I know that hasn't been always the case. We got people who flip out and turn to violence and do crazy things, but I would hope that there's a turning a little bit of, maybe I'm not here by mistake. Maybe there really is a purpose for my life. And that's what you hope for.
Yeah.
Light bulb goes off and you go, oh my goodness, this is what it's all about.
Yeah. Definitely. So, there's so many studies out there about the issue of fatherlessness and how it's connected to so many issues from drug abuse to even teen suicide. So, how can the church elevate the role of fathers, highlight the importance of fathers in a culture that sort of takes away the value of the father? The Bible talks about, it doesn't say visit the motherless. It says visit the fatherless and widowed. This issue is so close to God's heart.
Yeah. You know what? I think we've got to get really better at we need a lot of surrogate dads is what we need.
Mhm.
We have a plethora of people. We get thousands and thousands and thousands of young men who need mentors. And I don't think that's the government's job. I think that's the church's job, is to mentor. I certainly need to be better at that. I got some really good friends who have spent the last 10, 11, 12 years of their lives mentoring kids from the inner city. I guess that's a big reason why Rocket Town is active. It's a ministry I started in Nashville, and a lot of what we do is we mentor and love on kids who don't have very good families at all. So our staff at Rocket Town kind of mentors these kids because they know that they're loved and they're cherished, and doesn't matter what they've done, where they've come from, we just love them. So I think that is a crisis that we need to wake up to and realize that we've got to be a part of the solution, and we have the goods to be a solution and help. So let the church rise up.
Yeah.
And I'm pointing the finger right at me too.
So I have a 3-year-old son, Judah, and parenting a little boy is no joke.
I love it.
But what advice would you offer young fathers to raise up men who know and love the Lord?
Woo. Well, I've got 2 boys and I got 3 girls, and I got 16 grandkids too. So it's amazing. I think the big thing is being, obviously you need a lot of patience, and you need, you just, it's hard. I mean, it's just being parents hard. I mean, especially I look at moms and look at what Debbie did, and it's extraordinary. But we did it. We did it. And they're all grown up and married. We did it, and but I think the main thing is it's all about communication. You got to communicate. As they get older, they become teenagers. You've got to, if you blew it, you got to say, I'm sorry. You just got to communicate. You stop communicating, this gap can get so big. And then all of a sudden, you want to argue about everything. And you just got to love your kids like Jesus loves you, and that comes with a lot of patience. Also comes with boundaries and all that sort of thing. It all depends on what your kid into, and sometimes you got to have the tough love stuff, but they've got to know that you love them. And I think that's why and believe me, I've got my issues. We all do. But if there's any good in me, it's first and foremost Christ's work in my life. It's my dad, and how dad taught me to do life, and watching him model it. And I think that's what dad's got to do. You got to model it. You got to, they're going to watch what you do more than what you say, especially as they get older. When they're 15 and 16, they're going to go, what's my dad doing? How's he treat people? What kind of business dealings is he doing? So it's like, and my dad was just this amazing human being who just treated everybody better than himself, And so what happens is that boy of yours, he's going to want to be like his dad. So that's the dream scenario.
Yeah.
In the midst of all the, there'll be trials and tribulations. Go, oh my gosh, what's going on? You'll have those days, but you just stay consistent. You stay the course, and you pray a lot. You pray for your kids a lot.
Yeah.
And that God's hands on them, and Lord protect them, hedge of protection around them, and just live the life. Just live the life.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice. Right now, he's just walking around as Captain America everywhere.
Right.
Out of my hands.
I love it. That's awesome.
So, Michael, ultimately, what is your prayer for this book?
I think this book has a lot of hope in it. I think that, you always say encouragement, but they can just finish the book and going, you know what, I can do this. I can get through whatever comes my way, and that when they do see my dad and all these stories about my dad, and how you equate those stories with a promise of God, which I do that in every chapter. I take this great story about my dad and I equate it to a promise or a story about God, that they'll go, wow, man, he really is a good father. And that they'll be able to sing, he's a good father. That's who you are. That's who you are. And because sometimes I'll do that in concert. He's a good father. It's who you are. Tell him he's a good father.
Yeah.
And then, I'm loved by you. It's who I am. Tell yourself. If you got to look in the mirror, tell yourself he's a good father.
Yeah.
You just say it over yourself, and you tell him, and that'll sink in. I can promise you that. And it's a game changer.